Welcome to my channel Limelight Leaks. Please share and subscribe, and hit the bell icon for latest updates. I really love a great smile. We've done so much together by now. When Paul Walker died in a car crash in 2013, millions of people were shocked. But 10 years later, when people looked closer at what happened and read the court papers, they found some disturbing facts about what really happened. Things that made people question the simple accident story everyone heard at first. The day of the crash was Saturday, November 30th, 2013. It started as a happy celebration in Santa Clarita, California. The air was cool and fresh, the streets were quiet, and a small business park had been turned into a meeting place for people who love cars. Paul Walker, the 40-year-old movie star from the Fast and Furious films, wasn't working on a movie or doing a high-speed car chase. He was at a charity event, the kind of small fundraiser he liked better than big fancy Hollywood parties. The event was run by Reach Out Worldwide, which people called ROW. This was a charity that Walker started after a big earthquake hit Haiti in 2010. The charity helps people quickly after disasters happen. Car fans, families, and other actors came together to raise money for people hurt by Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. There were food stands, raffle tickets, and a row of fancy, expensive cars shining in the winter sun. One of those cars was a very rare Porsche Carrera GT. It was a low sports car with 605 horsepower that had a reputation for being as dangerous as it was good-looking. The car belonged to Roger Rodas, a professional race car driver, money advisor, and close friend to Walker's. The two men became friends over cars years before and often shared stories and drove on racetracks together. Rodas brought the Porsche to the event, partly to show it off and partly to enjoy a quick drive. Around 3:20 in the afternoon, Walker and Rodas decided to take the Porsche out for a short ride. People who were there remember Walker smiling and taking a few last pictures with fans before getting into the passenger seat. Rodas got behind the wheel. The V10 engine started up with a loud, deep sound that made everyone look. The car rolled out of the parking lot and onto Hercules Street. The drive was supposed to be quick and short. Less than a mile away, Hercules Street curves gently to the right. There are trees and light poles along the sides. People near the event heard the loud sound of the Porsche speeding up. Seconds later came the sound that would end two lives. A super loud crash followed by the boom of an explosion. A cloud of thick black smoke rose up above the buildings. Several people at the event ran toward the noise. The Porsche had hit a concrete light pole and two trees so hard that it broke into two pieces. The back part was twisted and destroyed. The front part was covered in flames. People tried to get close, but the heat was too strong. The fire, fed by the car's gas, wouldn't stop burning. When emergency workers arrived a few minutes later, the fire department worked fast to put out the fire. But it was too late. Both men were dead at the scene. In less than 60 seconds, a day meant for charity and bringing people together had turned into a scene of horror. News spread almost right away, first among car lovers, then on social media, and finally through big news companies. For fans who watched Paul Walker in movies for more than 10 years, often driving cars, the irony felt terrible. And for investigators, people who look into accidents, it was the start of a case that would get lots of attention, public guessing, and eventually multiple court cases. When investigators started putting together the final moments of Paul Walker and Roger Rodas, they treated it like any major deadly car crash. They treat the scene as both a sad event and a mystery to solve. Every tire mark, piece of broken car parts, and story from people who saw it had to be checked to rebuild what happened from when the Porsche Carrera GT left the charity event to the moment it hit the tree. At about 3:20 in the afternoon, when Walker and Rodas left the Reach Out Worldwide fundraiser in Valencia's Rye Canyon Business Park, Hercules Street, just outside the event is a fairly wide road. Not many cars usually drive there, but it isn't a race track. The speed limit posted was 45 miles per hour. Long open roads can be tempting for fast performance cars, but the road has curves, light poles, and some bumpy pavement. People who were there later told investigators they heard the Porsche's 5.7-liter V10 engine revving loudly as it sped up and drove away. The Carrera GT can reach 60 miles per hour in less than 4 seconds. It gives an explosive burst of speed, and people who saw it leave said it was pulling hard and going fast within seconds of leaving. According to the California Highway Patrol's official crash reconstruction report, the Porsche was going at an estimated 80 to 93 miles per hour as it came to a gentle right turn on Hercules Street. The curve itself isn't too sharp or dangerous, but at almost double the speed limit, there's very little room for mistakes. Investigators figured out the car moved slightly to the left before the driver tried to fix it. At that speed, even a small turn of the steering wheel can mess up the balance of a mid-engine supercar, especially one without electronic stability control. The 2005 Carrera GT was built without that safety system. That means once the tires lost their grip on the road, getting control back would depend completely on how skilled the driver was and how much road space was available. The CHP found no proof of drag racing with another car. They also noticed there were no traditional straight skid marks, something conspiracy believers grabbed onto later. But for crash experts, this made sense with a high-speed yaw or sideways slide, where tires leave curved scuff marks instead of long straight braking lines. The front right part of the Porsche hit a concrete light pole first, creating massive forces that slowed it down violently. The car then spun, and its left side hit 2 trees really fast, one after the other. The violence of the crash caused the carbon fiber body to break apart, splitting the car into 2 main pieces. The back part with the engine and the front cabin where Walker and Rodas were sitting. Broken pieces were scattered all over the road, and the fuel system broke almost instantly. A fire started within moments, making the flash of light seen on a nearby security camera. People who saw it described 2 different sounds. The first impact, and then right after, the lighting of the fireball. Several people from the charity event ran toward the wreck within seconds. They were stopped by intense heat and flames that made any rescue try impossible. The fire was so strong that by the time Los Angeles County firefighters got there, the entire front part of the car was burning. Both men were announced dead at the scene. Once the fire was put out, investigators started detailed scene documentation. They measured scrape patterns marked where debris was, and took pictures of the wreck from many angles. Pieces of the car, including parts of the tires, were collected to study later. The tire day codes showed they were about 9 years old. While they still had enough tread depth to be legal, rubber gets hard with age. This can reduce grip, especially under the extreme pressure of high-speed turning. The Porsche Carrera GT's computer systems only offered limited information. Unlike many newer cars, it didn't have a modern event data recorder that saves full information from before crash. Because of this, speed guesses were based on physical evidence and math calculations rather than a digital black box. The CHP's final report said that unsafe speed was the main cause of the crash. They found no evidence of sudden mechanical problems in the engine, steering, or suspension that would have directly caused the crash. However, they noted things that contributed, including the car's lack of stability control and the possible effects of old tires on traction. The official summary described the Porsche as a car with limited room for mistakes at high speeds, especially not on a racetrack. Combined with the speed it was going, those safe margins disappeared completely in the moments before impact. By the time the wreck was cleared that evening, the official story was set. A rare high-performance car, going at almost twice the speed limit, lost control on a public road and hit fixed objects with deadly results. Yet even as investigators closed their case, questions about design, how safe the car was in crashes, and the car's behavior at the moment of impact would fuel court cases. These issues kept the tragedy in the news headlines for years to come. The morning after the crash, the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office started the process of confirming who the people were and figuring out the exact causes of death. While the scene photos and stories from people who saw it had already made the outcome clear, the forensic process would give the factual foundation for both the official investigation and the legal battles that would come next. Because the fire was so bad, visual identification alone wasn't possible. Dental records were used to confirm who both men were: Roger Rodas, 38, and Paul Walker, 40. This step was really important not just for the investigation, but also for legal stuff like death certificates and insurance claims. Any wrongful death lawsuits that need absolute confirmation. The autopsy report on Paul Walker said he died from a combination of traumatic and thermal injuries. This means the blunt force trauma from the crash and the burns from the fire after were both deadly factors. Traumatic injuries included broken bones in the jaw, collarbone, arms, ribs, pelvis, and spine. The impact forces were so great that multiple bone systems were affected. The fire covered the cabin almost right away after the crash, and burn patterns showed exposure to really strong flames. The coroner decided that Walker was alive when the fire started because soot was found in his windpipe. This was evidence that he had breathed in smoke. Drug tests came back negative for alcohol or illegal drugs. This confirmed that being impaired or drunk played no role. At the time of his death, Walker was wearing a seat belt and sitting in the passenger seat. Rodaz's autopsy said he died from multiple traumatic injuries that happened at the moment of impact. His injuries were bad enough that the coroner concluded death happened almost instantly, before the fire could cause major burns. Like Walker, Rodaz's drug screening was negative for alcohol and drugs. He was confirmed to be the driver through injury patterns and where he was sitting. Investigators also noted that the driver's seatbelt showed clear signs of load from the crash. This was consistent with him being behind the wheel. One of the most closely looked at parts of the autopsies and later the court cases was the seatbelt system. Meadow Walker's lawyers would later argue that the seatbelt's anchor point and retractor design caused it to jam under crash forces. They claimed it trapped Paul Walker in the passenger seat as the fire spread. The coroner's report didn't make a judgment on seatbelt performance beyond noting that Walker was held by the belt at the time of the crash. However, pictures taken at the scene showed the belt still buckled across his body. Porsche and independent experts argued against the lawsuit claims. They said the forces involved in the impact were unsurvivable no matter how the seatbelt worked. The forensic findings suggested a difference in when the deaths happened. Rodaz likely died instantly from the impact, while Walker survived the first crash but died within seconds. He died from a combination of trauma and fire. This timeline became a key point in the wrongful death lawsuit. Meadow Walker's legal team claimed her father could have escaped if the seatbelt design had been different. The official report, however, made no decision on whether survival was possible beyond stating the medical causes of death. When the coroner's findings were released in January 2014, they caused renewed media coverage. The detail that Walker was alive after the crash, even briefly, was especially hard for fans to process. Some saw it as proof of a death that could have been prevented. Others saw it as a tragic thing that couldn't be stopped given how violent the crash was. In the court of public opinion, the autopsy fed both grief and guessing. But in the court of law, it became a central piece of evidence. It would be looked at again, reinterpreted, and argued about as lawsuits against Porsche went on over the next several years. When Paul Walker and Roger Rodaz lost their lives in a fiery crash, the immediate question wasn't just how it happened, but why. The California Highway Patrol, called CHP, and the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department started a joint investigation that would last months. It involved forensic vehicle experts, crash reconstructionists, and engineers. It was a careful process that tried to strip away rumors and reach a clear cause. First responders had two overlapping priorities: put out the intense fire covering the Porsche Carrera GT and keep the crash site safe for evidence. Deputies quickly noted that the car had hit a light pole and two trees along Hercules Street in Valencia, California. This was just a few hundred yards from where the Reach Out Worldwide charity event was. Pictures taken that day would later become really important for investigators. They showed deep yaw marks, which are curved tire marks from a skidding car. The marks began in the right lane and moved toward the curb before impact. That pattern hinted early on that speed and loss of control were major factors. The CHP brought in its multidisciplinary accident investigation team, called MAIT. This is a unit that specializes in reconstructing serious and high-profile crashes. MAIT investigators follow a structured process which includes measuring and documenting every physical mark on the road. They analyze yaw and skid marks to calculate how fast the car was going. They inspect the wreck for mechanical problems, fluid leaks, or failures. They test environmental conditions like road surface, lighting, and weather. They talk with the manufacturer about known model-specific issues. In Walker's case, they also had to work around the fact that the Carrera GT had been almost completely destroyed by fire. This made mechanical inspection especially challenging. One of the first solid findings came from analyzing the yaw marks and impact damage. The CHP's math factored in the radius of the tire marks, how much friction the asphalt had, and the distance traveled. This placed the car's speed at between 80 and 93 miles per hour when control was lost. The posted limit on Hercules Street was 45 miles per hour. The Porsche hit the curb at high speed, spinning slightly before the passenger side struck a tree. The side impact was terrible and instantly damaged the structure of the car and broke the fuel system. Seconds later, a fire covered the wreck. Perhaps the most damning factor that wasn't speed was the tires. All 4 Michelin Pilot Sport tires were the originals from 2005. This made them 9 years old at the time of the crash. While the tread depth was still within usable limits, CHP investigators said the age-related hardening of the rubber likely contributed to reduced grip. High-performance cars like the Carrera GT are especially sensitive to tire condition. Even small reductions in traction can have big effects at high speed, especially on a street not designed for racing. The Carrera GT's remains were looked at in detail at a secure CHP facility. Despite fire damage, investigators were able to figure out that the braking system was working before impact. The steering system showed no sign of failure before impact. The suspension parts were intact. There was no evidence of an engine or transmission problem. In other words, there was no sudden mechanical defect that caused the crash. This finding would later become central to Porsche's defense in multiple court cases. Hercules Street is a short industrial area loop with wide lanes but no shoulders. It's lined with light poles and trees. On the day of the crash, the weather was clear and dry. CHP measured the road surface's friction and found it consistent with other Southern California asphalt surfaces. No oil, debris, or loose gravel was there. This eliminated environmental dangers as a main cause. As with any high-profile crash involving an exotic car, the manufacturer was contacted. Porsche sent engineers to inspect the remains and review the CHP's findings. In their independent assessment, the company agreed there was no sign of mechanical failure. They also pointed out that the Carrera GT was a race-bred supercar with limited electronic driver aids. It had no stability control and minimal traction control. This meant it demanded expert handling. Porsche pointed out that in Motor Trend tests, the Carrera GT could speed up from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just over 3 seconds and reach over 200 miles per hour. But they also said it was known in the car enthusiast community for being unforgiving at the limit. By March 2014, the CHP and Sheriff's Department released their official joint report. The cause of the crash was unsafe speed for the roadway conditions. No mechanical failure or roadway condition was found to have contributed. They set the speed at 80 to 93 miles per hour. They blamed the loss of control on too much speed combined with the old tires. They ruled out any foul play or outside interference. Despite the official conclusion, Paul Walker's daughter Meadow and Roger Rodas' widow Christine hired private investigators and accident reconstructionists to review the evidence. These experts challenged several parts of the CHP's findings. Some argued the yaw mark analysis could be wrong because of fire damage to the tires after the impact. Others suggested that certain mechanical parts might have failed. Particularly in the steering system, they could have failed in a way that couldn't be detected after the fire. Meadows' legal team claimed Porsche knew the Carrera GT had a history of being unstable at high speed and a fuel system that could easily rupture. These disputes set the stage for years of court battles. Much of it focused on whether the crash was purely driver error or partly due to car design. When the speed numbers and tire age were made public, they caused a heated debate among fans and car journalists. Some felt the report unfairly suggested reckless behavior without accounting for possible moves to avoid something. Others argued that driving a high-powered supercar at nearly twice the speed limit on a public street was risky no matter what. It didn't matter if the car was working right or not. The absence of mechanical failure also frustrated people hoping for an explanation beyond human error. For Walker's family and Rodaz's loved ones, it meant that blame in the official record rested squarely on the driver and conditions. In summary, the official investigation concluded that Paul Walker's death was the result of too much speed in a high-performance car with old tires. It wasn't a hidden defect or sabotage. But the controversy didn't end there. It shifted to the courtroom where Porsche's design decisions would be put on trial. Paul Walker's death didn't just leave a hole in Hollywood. It triggered a chain of lawsuits that would stretch over years. It pitted his family against one of the most respected names in car engineering. The court question wasn't just how he died, but who, if anyone, should be held responsible. The first major lawsuit came in 2014 from Christine Rodaz, widow of driver Roger Rodaz. She sued Porsche Cars North America. She claimed that defects in the Carrera GT, including a faulty suspension system and not enough crash protection, caused her husband's death. Christine's claim was that Roger was not speeding. She said a failure in the car's suspension caused it to go out of control. She also argued the car didn't have critical safety features that could have saved both men. Features like a stability control system that was standard on most high-performance cars of that time. A reinforced fuel cell to prevent fires after crashes. Side door reinforcements to improve crash survivability. Porsche responded with a strong denial. Their engineers insisted the car was in perfect working order before the crash. They said the only cause was too much speed for the conditions. In 2016, a federal judge sided with Porsche. The judge dismissed Christine Rodaz's lawsuit, saying there wasn't enough evidence for mechanical failure. The more high-profile legal battle began in September 2015. That's when Paul Walker's daughter, Meadow Walker, who was then 16, filed her own wrongful death lawsuit against Porsche. Her complaint accused the company of designing a car that was dangerous by nature. She said it lacked safety equipment that could have prevented her father's death. Meadow's legal team built their case around several key claims. One was a defective seat belt design. They claimed the seat belt's anchor placement caused it to jam after impact. This allegedly trapped Paul in the passenger seat. Another claim was lack of crash survival features. They pointed to the absence of an electronic stability control system, crash cage, and energy-absorbing fuel lines. They also claimed Porsche had known risks. They said Porsche had long been aware of the Carrera GT's history of being unstable and having control issues. But the company still marketed it as a road legal car. The lawsuit also directly challenged CHP's finding that speed was the main cause. Meadow's lawyers argued that while the car was going fast, it wasn't so fast that a well-designed supercar should have been unrecoverable in that curve. Porsche's reply left no room for compromise. They stated bluntly that Paul Walker knowingly and voluntarily took on all risk by riding in the Carrera GT. They said the car was misused and improperly maintained by its owners. They pointed again to the 9-year-old tires. They said speed, not a design flaw, was the only cause of the crash. They also said Paul was a knowledgeable and sophisticated user of the product. The company also brought up an important legal point. California law limits automaker liability in cases where a car meets federal safety standards at the time of manufacturing. The Carrera GT produced in 2004 followed all rules that applied. In April 2017, the case took an unexpected turn. Court records showed that Meadow Walker and Porsche reached a confidential settlement. The terms were never made public. But TMZ reported that both sides agreed to keep financial details sealed. For Meadow, the resolution ended years of legal battles. But the settlement's secrecy meant the public would never get a clear ruling on whether Porsche had any legal blame. The legal fallout didn't stop with Meadow. Separate wrongful death claims and insurance disputes happened quietly in the background. After losing in federal court, Christine tried to revive her case in state court. But she faced the same result: dismissal. Universal Pictures insurers reportedly paid Meadow $10.1 million in 2014. This was part of a settlement acknowledging her father's lost earnings because Fast and Furious 7 production was stopped. Meadow's lawyers also reached agreements with unnamed parties connected to the car's maintenance and storage. This suggested liability was spread among multiple defendants. While the lawsuits played out in court, another battle raged in public opinion. Porsche's legal filings often made headlines for their blunt tone. This included the statement that Paul was a knowledgeable user who knew the risks of high-performance cars. Fans saw these lines as mean and insensitive. They felt it framed a beloved actor's death as the result of his own choices. Porsche, for its part, focused on protecting its brand from what it saw as false accusations. Even though Porsche never admitted fault, the lawsuits uncovered and confirmed key facts. The Carrera GT had no stability control system. This was rare in 2014, but almost standard today. The car was marketed as a race car for the road, with driving demands far above typical street cars. Safety improvements like reinforced fuel tanks and modern restraint systems could have been added, but they weren't required by law at the time. Tire age and maintenance history played a big role in expert evaluations of the crash. By the time the last lawsuit was closed, the official record still matched CHP's original conclusion. Unsafe speed caused the crash, not mechanical failure. But the settlements meant no jury ever weighed in on whether the Carrera GT's design made it more dangerous than necessary. For Meadow Walker, the legal fight got her financial stability. It also preserved her father's legacy from narratives she viewed as unfair. For Porsche, the conclusion meant avoiding a public ruling that could set precedent against high-performance car makers. Yet, in the eyes of many fans, the lawsuits only made the mystery deeper. Was Paul Walker's death an unavoidable tragedy caused by a split-second driving error, or a preventable disaster rooted in design choices?